Hey everybody, Ben Fung here. I'm finally back. For those that you don't know, my whole family's been sick for the last 2 weeks or so. I'm still actually kind of draining. You kind of hear the sinus congestion. I'm still probably going to sputter a little bit with some coughing. This is actually going to be for my dad blog, Daddy in the Raw, or daddyintheraw.com, about my life as a work-at-home dad. And I scheduled out a whole bunch of blog posts on the site, and then I realized I forgot to actually record this blab since I got sick. And really, it's about my perspective, my personal perspective about ADD, or what I grew up as with ADD. Now it's ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and there's several subgroups and whatnot. Many of you may not know this. I actually, I was once I guess I still am, an anonymous or pen name based columnist for International Concern on Asian parenting and child rearing with behavioral concerns such as ADD or ADHD. And ages ago, when I was diagnosed with it, it was the usual thing, right? This kid's misbehaving, has too much energy, never listens in class, disobeys all the time, that kind of stuff. Then they eventually put me on Ritalin, and I took it for a little while. Didn't like how it made me feel because I felt like I was out of control of my own body, too calm for my own good. And it was strange. It was, I can only recall that I wanted to do many active things, but then couldn't seem to have the neural drive to do them. And then eventually I just said no. I told my mom, no, we're not going to do this anymore. And I'm going to just figure out a way to modify or channel my behaviors in a way that is, quote, socially acceptable. And let me just make sure I'm not going on a crazy tangent. But I wanted to share this because recently I've noticed kind of this Western irony. We have this huge thing about uniqueness and being special. And then there's that quote from The Incredibles by Pixar, right? If everybody's special, then no one is. And this whole thing where, this huge idea about being independent. But then there's also all this pressure to conform to various norms, be it, standardized testing or the public school classroom, all these various things. And many of these norms, especially the social norms, are good. But at the same time, I wonder if we're applying them to, in the wrong type of timing to our children. There's a lot of smart kids out there, and they end up, I feel there's a lot of undue pressure on them because they have the right responses. And then they're held to the same level of the responses they have, but it's no different than somebody learning a foreign language, being able to say, yes, thank you for this, or thank you for that, or where's the bathroom. Doesn't mean they actually understand every, bit of cultural and societal context of those behavioral interactions. Now, as this pertains to, attention deficit disorder and hyperactivity disorder, what I wanted to share with you is my personal experience, now reflecting on it as a parent. Sorry, just a little congested. I see it now as a continuum. I don't really see it as, oh, you have this thing and you have to take medications for it and you're diagnosed for it. I don't think it's a very accurate nor healthy way of perceiving this. I see all of this as kind of this, I don't want to use the word spectrum because that's kind of reserved for other concerns, but call it a continuum of the way your brain and your body processes things. I wrote this article that highly resonated with both parents and ADHD readers, where I aligned, the ADHD mind as not necessarily one with deficit disorder. That's the external expression. Like somebody classified with ADD or ADHD looks like they have a deficit for disorder, but really what's going on is they have a surplus of the ability to attend. Okay, so imagine if there were, I used the marble jars analogy, and everybody seemed to love it, and they really agreed with it, regardless of how they were classified. That if you are consider somebody in the continuum of having more or less ADD or ADHD, what ends up happening is you have your jar of marbles that you can put in marbles in, and those marbles represent certain levels of attention. And you fill that jar up, and the kid is neurologically stimulated to a level of satisfaction. And if it's, say, below the half fill line, then it ends up being less than satisfied. And if they're at the very, very bottom, then they're basically bored and they're seeking stimulation. And I kind of came to grips with this when I was getting my doctorate in physical therapy with a pediatric theory called sensory integration theory, where kids will, interact with the environment around them according to what their senses require of them to develop appropriately. As it pertains to, ADD, I remember as a child, it wasn't that I wasn't paying attention to the class or the teacher. It was that I could not only do that, I could also go to the back of the room, walk around, color geography and study that, do my math problems at the same time, think about 20 other different things, how much I loved Star Wars, and then, loop back to my, the classroom setting where they're sitting down and having this, story time or what have you. And I could still recall everything, and it's not that I had divided all my attention up. It was that I could do all these things in parallel. It's just part of a continuum. Some people are, quote, better multitaskers. People are less. I know there's studies that say that, nobody's really good at it. Sure. But, nobody's really good at it compared to doing one thing. But, at the younger levels of development, doing just one thing is just too boring. It's mentally suffocating. If you imagine somebody on the lesser continuum of ADD, somebody who's normal, they have a smaller jar of marbles, and say you put in one marble for sitting down in class, another marble for paying attention to the teacher, another marble for not thinking about what they're going to do when they get home, another marble for resisting the temptation to play with their friends, and their jar holds 5 marbles. Now they have 4. Well, they're 80% neurologically satisfied. It's easy for them to sit there and, quote, behave. But for the ADD individual, their jar of marble holds, say, 50 of them. They're only 10% or less than 10% fulfilled. They need to really engage. It's kind of like swimming sharks. Sharks drown if they don't swim. And those considered part of the continuum of ADD or ADHD drown mentally when they don't keep moving, right? When they don't fidget. And there's a lot of studies that show, fidgeting is actually good for kids with ADD. You shouldn't stop them from fidgeting, pumping their legs or tapping their fingers or their pens or pencils. Those are all ways that they are neurologically engaging to get a better outcome of their behaviors as well as their mental development. So that was kind of like the big portion of what I wanted to share about my perspectives now as a parent on ADD is that, it's not so much a condition as much as it's just part of a continuum of how kids process things and how their mind is developing, how their body is developing, how they're expressing themselves. And we shouldn't box them in per se. Now, they can't be disruptive, but the norm is their norm. It's not anybody else's norm. And if we can appreciate that, certain kids are more artistic and others are more analytical, we should certainly be able to appreciate that certain kids require much more sensory, stimulation on one side, and others need a little less. Some kids can do 50 things at once and be highly engaged. Others can sit there and read a book for 5 hours. And that's great. They're just different ways that kids are growing, learning about their minds and their bodies, and developing within those forays. So I'll be posting this on my blog. I use Blab for a number of reasons. One is I love their recording and uploading capabilities. And those are just my thoughts. Those are just my shares in how I process and see it now as a parent, as an individual who has been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, who has, quote, conquered it, made a life for myself, gotten out of that rut, all that kind of stuff, done the impossible. I really don't think it is. I think it's just recognizing that this is not an abnormality. It's not a disease. It's not an excuse. It's nothing. It's just a different continuum from one side to the other of how people and their brains, process the world and respond to the world. Like, I'm not Neo. I don't see the world as extra slow. I just process it the way I process it. And so do you. So I will post that on my Daddy and the Raw Dad blog. And I'll see if I can either get that loaded today or tomorrow. I'm still trying to catch up since, again, the whole family's been sick. And, I hope you enjoyed this and have a little bit of appreciation further, maybe a different perspective on ADD, ADHD from a parent's perspective, and not only that, from a parent who has it, right? And now that I'm dealing with my own kiddo, I don't think he has it at all. I think he's actually a very focused kid, but now I know to interpret his behaviors differently. That it's not all, it's not digital. It's not that he does or he doesn't. It's more of he exists somewhere within a continuum of various traits and various stages of development. And I think if we, millennial parents can start to really engage ourselves in that fashion, and engage our kids in that fashion, they'll be far better for it. So that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I'll load up to my blog and to my YouTube channel. I decided just to keep one YouTube channel for simplicity, at Dr. Ben Fung. And otherwise, that's it. So thanks for being with me, and I will see you next time.